Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. Story number 1, Savages, written by Svanya Watson. His calm was not born of insertions, but of clarity. He already knew what had happened and how it would play out. He waited outside the Lord High General's office, letting the harried couriers and lesser generals bustle about. A subtle feeling led him to move to the other side of the entryway as a door swung violently open where he'd just been. "The Lord High General calls for the Royal Seer Turkanon." The guard that opened the door and barked it out hadn't even noticed Turkanon until he was halfway through the door. As he approached the broad desk and bowed, "Lord High General, I am at your service." The general's voice was hoarse from non-stop meetings since the first light of dawn. "The primitives in the system here," he said, pointing at a star chart. "You've seen the reports. What is your assessment?" Turkanon closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. Not that he needed to, but it helped maintain the mystery of his line. Long bred for intuition to the point of being nearly precognizant. "They are savage, brutish creatures, capable of only violence. This has led to them to fight each other, making the strongest amongst them their leader. Strong they are, too, far superior to our raw abilities. But that's what weapons are for." The general nodded in assent and motioned for the seer to continue. "Due to their violence, they will advance only slowly, if at all, assuming they do not do us the favor of wiping themselves out first. Worst case, they may advance rudimentary armor at a few hundred quat. We can use this to our advantage, as we have the technology and weapons to make us, that is, you, Lord High General, the leader of them all." "Strategy?" the general asked. "Overwhelming show of force. As they gather in groups, find the largest gathering first and kill the leader, and fighting capable males outright and capture the rest. They're undisputed. The demonstration, using their own methods, will make you their undisputed leader. From there, it is a simple matter to assimilate bordering groups, to grow an army of the creatures organically. They'll be frenetically dedicated to you and do your will. They will also make good slaves for mineral extraction." "Thank you, Tarkanon. The other generals are concerned by the strength of the beasts, while the scientists want to study them. And at least one princess wants to protect them. Ha! The entire system is wealth for the Empire, and 1,000,000 of those beasts on chains in front of our armies will secure our place in the galaxy forever." "Exactly as you say, Lord High General." Tarkanon bowed and left the general's office to return to his own study. As he walked through the city towards the library, activity around him forts increased. Shuttles were already transporting troops to the waiting ships in orbit. A quarter of the quat to board and prepared the fleet, then 3/4 there. The system would be under the Empire's control in just over 1 quat, which leaves another 999 to plan for. This would be the Empire's greatest turning. Tarkanon entered the library and climbed the steps to his study. It was quiet here, and he could shut out the world around him. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, not for show, but to clear his mind, let his intuition wander. Suspicion niggled at the back of his mind. Something was missing, but he wasn't sure what it was. He was trying to let intuition guide him to this missing piece, when he felt that he should stand and face his comms. He stood for only a moment when it chimed, and the Lord High General's assistant showed up on the screen. "How may I help?" Turkanon asked. "The Lord High General requests your attendance to this campaign." The assistant didn't wait for a reply, but disconnected immediately. As with all things the general did, this is an order, not a request. Tarkanon took the bag that he had packed the previous day, knowing that he would need it, but not why. He made his way to the fort and turned left at the sign that pointed to the right, shuttles. A short way down the road he met the general's staff, boarding a private shuttle. He let himself in. He was shuttled to the command ship and settled into his cryopod. The general wouldn't board until just before they left and wouldn't have time to consult him anyway. He woke to a cacophony of alarms and shouting. Something had gone wrong, in the worst possible way. Tarkanan made his way to the bridge, and the sight that filled the screens was unbelievable. This was the same planet, but it was ringed with artificial satellites, cities that lit up the night skies, vast amounts of pollutants in the atmosphere. It shouldn't be possible. He knew that they would never advance. "Did someone get here before us?" the general barked out. "Scans show the same creatures," one of the deck officers responded. "Hundreds of quarts to get crude armor!" The general's face was distorted with rage as he rose and towered over the seer. "You said that they would never advance!" "Perhaps, Lord High General, I let logic try and explain the reason for my intuition. But I stand by it. An overwhelming show of force, and they will follow you blindly." The general grunted and sat back down. He pulled up a holographic globe and picked the brightest spot in the night sky. "We're setting down there," he said. "Set a course and lock it in. The fighters can flatten the landing area for us." "Lord High General," the comms officer said, "we're getting even more radio wave transmissions from the planet, all across the spectrum. Should we analyze it before we—" "No! Take us in!" The fighters flew in ahead of the formation and began blasting the strange towers to flatten the land for the fleet. The response from the creatures was immediate. Flying machines harried the fighters, tearing holes through them and projectile weapons, and finally destroying them with flying bombs. The fleet came over the horizon, flying machines at their backs, and we met head-on with missiles firing from the area of destruction. Turkanon felt the unsurety that had bothered him fall away. The general's ship and the fleet along with it would die here. His fate was to sink with the ship in the deep water off the coast that they were approaching. In this evening's news, we are not alone, but we may not be safe. An alien invasion in Europe destroyed much of the Belanu before NATO troops were able to bring them down. Thousands dead and many more missing. The underwater salvage is underway in the North Sea to recover as many of the alien ships as possible. Here's Dr. Silver from the European Space Administration to tell us what they hope to learn from the wreckage. End of story. Story number 2. They Never Stop, written by Star Stuff Drifter. Nuclear bombs, multiple wars, attempted genocide, poisoned their planet at some point, violent and territorial. Seems pretty standard to me. What makes this species so dangerous compared to everybody else is the Galactic Federation. The High Counselor read through the report and looked up questioningly around the room. An uncomfortable silence took over, and nobody seemed to want to answer the question until Theric, Ambassador, stepped forward. He was a small creature with a hard, scaly skin and pointy face. His 4 eyes met the High Counselor's and began to explain. "Yes, High Counselor, that is correct. Most species had dealt with the same problems on their way to the stars. Eventually, space becomes the final frontier, and that is usually the point when most of it, if not all problems on the origin planet get resolved. War and social unrest usually becomes a thing of the past, and unity takes place. But the problem with the new species is that they didn't overcome their issue. You see, we have been monitoring them for quite a while now, and with every passing century, their technological advancement becomes more impressive. Somewhat on the same level as the other newly spacefaring species, but, and here is the but, High Chancellor." The Theric Ambassador took out a small device and activated it. A bright shining light filled the conference hall, and a 3D projection that could be seen from every angle became viewable to every species ambassador. A small recording showed a young species in the very early stages of spaceflight and colonization. "This too seems standard to me, Lord Ambassador. I don't see the prob—" The High Chancellor was cut short when the recording skipped a few decades. The species had settled a closed planet at this point and established a new colony. Most species would at this point contemplate their next course of action to establish permanent trade routes and support for their origin planet. But this new species did no such thing. Instead, the recording showed the new colony fighting against their own origin planet. Massive ships bombarded each other in space. Even worse, some of the shots missed and fired directly at the colony behind them, hitting city centers. "You see, High Chancellor, we have been observing them for a few decades longer and have not initiated first contact as is tradition. The reason being that this species, who calls themselves human, doesn't try to live as a unified people, and instead they keep waging wars on one another. They actively go out of their way to work together and instead look for a reason to be different from one another. Our agents placed bugs in most of their political, social, and military apparatus, and we have learned their languages quite well. They still have not decided to speak one tongue and are still made up of many smaller countries. Even their continents act separate from one another. The moment their new colony, which was designated Mars by them, grew into a self-sustaining planet, the humans on Mars declared their independence. The origin planet and its moon, Luna, are now waging war against Mars. Again, the uncomfortable silence took over the conference hall. This was indeed problematic. The High Chancellor rubbed his eyes and used the other two arms to scratch his head. They had no experience with a situation like this. Every species who was invited into the Galactic Federation was at least unified. The Tharic ambassador cleared his throat and addressed the Councillor one more time. The other ambassadors and I came to a decision last time we contemplated the situation with the humans, and this is why we have called for your final judgment. With a heavy heart, we have accepted that the humans, as they are now, have no place in the Federation, and we fear that this shall be the case forever. We do not want their instability and erratic behavior to affect the rest of the galaxy. We have a duty to guarantee peace and prosperity for every sentient being in the Federation, and with humans in the picture, this will be much harder. For all their technological advancement, they are still socially primitive, as they were in the early hunters and gatherer days. The way we see it, they will continue to quickly develop more dangerous technologies to wage war on each other. They have never stopped fighting each other in all of their history. They will never stop. We want to declare the space humans inhabit a no-go zone and forbid any contact. For now, we should only observe. What is your final judgment, High Counselor? A long few minutes passed, and the Counselor finally spoke. Decision granted, Ambassador. Effective immediately, humans are barred from the Galactic Federation until further notice. Any attempt to contact them or enter the no-go zone will be met with accounts of treason and possibly a death sentence. Please notify your people. This meeting is hereby adjourned. End of story. I just quickly want to thank the Tier 5 patrons and channel members: Alithia Barkey, Cam Maxwell, Caspar Arnholtz, Albarden Guster, Arcadian, Lord Azrakal, and Joachim Backer.